Now, I don't know about you, but I think one of the most underappreciated jobs in sport worldwide is being a grounds manager, and that's whether it's mowing your local footy paddock or looking after turf at one of the biggest stadiums in Australia. I don't think these people get enough credit.
It is such an important role within the sports, and one of the best in the business is Matthew Oliver. He's currently the grounds manager at Suncorp Stadium, but he's looked after a number of other stadiums as well.
And he joins us now to give us a little bit of an insight in what it takes to keep a sports ground up to standard. Matthew, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Morning, boys. Great to be with you.
Now, when did you first realise you had a passion for turf? Like, when did you first get into the whole world of turf?
Probably when I was a fair bit younger than I am now. I played cricket at a pretty high level when I was younger, and I guess as a cricketer you naturally have a bit of an appreciation for turf wickets and outfields and that sort of stuff, and that's probably where it first started. And when I guess when I was 18 I came back from playing a couple of years in the UK and looked into getting an apprenticeship. So I did and got into golf course and worked my way through the ranks and worked my way through golf course to a stadium and to where I am now at Suncorp. So pretty unique journey.
Yeah, very. Now, this might be a bit boring to some people, but I found it quite intriguing. You have a diploma in ornamental horticulture, and a Certificate 3 and a diploma in turf and turf grass management. Without going too much into detail, what did you actually do for these courses?
So take a step back. So I'd started off doing a Cert 2 when I was doing my apprenticeship on the job. So there was a component which was block release trade school with 20 other students back when I was a young whippersnapper, I guess. And once we got through the apprenticeship, I then furthered my studies to do the diploma, which was essentially an extension of those studies. So covering sports turf nutrition, drainage, irrigation, design, construction, all that sort of stuff. Disease and pest management. And then I also did, the diploma in horticulture, which is, gardens, parks and gardens, essentially. So pretty much just identifying, trees, shrubs, plants, that sort of stuff. And, that was just an extension of the apprenticeship that I did as well back in Melbourne, back in the day. So, nothing too exciting, but, I wouldn't certainly hold you in good stead to have those qualifications as you look to progress your career.
Yeah, exactly. So do you have the best backyard in Australia then with the grass?
I'd like to say yes, but I've got a 4.5-year-old boy and I've got a 2-year-old Maremma sheepdog, so I'll leave you to come up with your own conclusions there. So it looks okay, but it's certainly not a world beater at the moment, that's for sure.
Certainly not Suncorp Stadium?
No, definitely not Suncorp Stadium.
No. Did you ever, when you were in Melbourne, did you ever look after your local footy pitch at all?
Not really. I guess the most I got involved with my local club was at my local cricket club, where I just looked after the line marking and that sort of stuff and the practice nets. But nothing. Unfortunately, the model down there was the council looks after everything. The clubs don't really get a say, so that kept you at arm's length. So just did some line marking, marked the wickets and that sort of stuff. So it was enough to keep me interested anyway.
Yeah. Speaking of Suncorp, being the grounds manager, what does it actually entail?
So pretty much everything on the field of play, so setting up for events. So that's obviously our core business. We'll host in excess of 60 events this calendar year. So pretty much just setting up for the different codes. So on the weekend we had... who did we have Friday night? We had the Dolphins, Cowboys. This Thursday we've got the Broncos and the Storm, and then we've got the Dolphins and the Warriors on Saturday, and then we go into finals. So where we currently situate ourselves is, we don't really have any code changeovers until we get into the A-League, whereas we go back to February, March, where we were having concerts into Super Rugby, so the Queensland Reds, and then the Roar, and then the Dolphins and the Broncos. So obviously each one of those codes has their own requirements that we need to adhere to. So we obviously just had the Women's World Cup recently, and then the changeover back to rugby league. So it was a bit of a disguising act on the weekend, trying to get rid of our lines from the soccer because they've been marked consistently for 6 weeks. So a bit of a disguising act, but I think we did pretty well.
Yeah, it looked pretty good to me. What is that? What's like the process if the Broncos have to play and then the next game is like a rugby union match or a soccer match?
Yep.
What's the process to change the pitch from that to that?
So if it's a rugby league to rugby union, the posts stay in and we just wash out the lines, as the lines are different between union and league, or league and union, depending on which way you're going. So the sidelines stay the same, halfway line stays the same, the try line stays the same, but the dead ball line or the in-goal area for league is only 8 metres, whereas union it's 10, so you've got to wash out the dead ball line. And obviously the field markings are different as well. So league, you've got your 10, 20, 30, 40 metre lines, and then your hash lines running up north-south up your field, whereas union, it's a bit simpler with its line markings, only a dashed 10 metre line running across the field, and then a solid 22 metre line, and then a dashed 5 metre line from the try line. So essentially wash those out with a hose, but we put a chemical out before that, just to aid in the removal of that paint from the grass.
Okay.
It's a special type of paint that we use. It's a removable paint, whereas during the Women's World Cup we didn't use the removable paint because we didn't want it to wash off the leaf. So,
Okay, yes.
but if we're obviously going from league to soccer, it's certainly different. We've got to remove the goalposts and do a complete washout, and then remark your soccer lines and go from there.
Okay, so that's with the different lines and that sort of stuff. With
Yep.
the grass itself, you said
Yep.
like you've done cricket and all different types of other sports. Is there any major differences in curating the grass itself for these different sports?
Yeah, there is. Certainly changes with time of year. Certainly for summer, we try to be a fair bit shorter in here. So we've got a Bermuda grass, couch grass playing surface. So, we do our very best to try and promote lateral growth rather than upright growth. Whereas, winter time, so pretty much through now, we've had ryegrass seeded into our couch all year, and it's now basically it's about trying to get that balance right between the two different grasses. I guess the surface to ball interaction or ball to surface interaction is different between the sports. So obviously for soccer or football, depending on where you're from, that's obviously critical to make sure your surface is dead flat, whereas league and union, it's a bit different. They don't really mind it too much if there's the odd indentation or divot. But that can be the challenge, particularly when you've got 3 codes on one weekend, which we'll certainly have going into February, March, April next year.
Yeah. Now, I've got to ask, it's everyone else's favourite time, but I'm sure you'd be dreading it as the groundskeeper, Magic Round. What is your thoughts on it?
Oh, it's an incredible concept. I think it's an incredible weekend for Brisbane, the city. Everyone gets involved. The colour, the amount of people in the stadium, just the tourism, the amount of people that come up from Melbourne and Sydney. It's a wonderful concept, but one thing that does hurt us is just the amount of use that we get, and we are a heavily utilised stadium, and we're never going to shy away from that. And that's obviously my remit, is to make sure we've got the best, most the playing surface that can handle that as best as we can. But that can certainly be challenging when you've got other factors such as weather as well that you can't really control.
Yeah. So during Magic Round, what do you guys do like in between the games to make sure that the surface stays playable?
So before or after each night's play, we run the mower over the field, a collection mower, remove any debris that's collected on the surface during the games, which is a fair bit. There's a fair bit of like chaffy grass,
Yep.
a few divots here and there, and then essentially we're just walking the field, replacing divots, making sure there's no indentations that could cause an injury. And that's probably the thing I was really most proud of the last Magic Round, where there was a fair bit of scrutiny going into Magic Round. The playing surface has been hammered. What's it going to look like? And we didn't have a single injury out of the weekend, which was really promising. So, but outside of that, no, just the liquid fertiliser overnight in between games, and try and perk up some growth for the next day.
Very nice. So when there is actually football happening, like on Friday when the Cows played the Dolphins, are you actually there at the stadium watching the game?
Yep. We've always got staff on. There's always a worst case scenario, like what if a goalpost snaps or something like that, which would never happen. But we've obviously got to have representation here. We walk the field at half time before every game, or after warm ups and at half time, and then after the game we're often out there with our collection mowers and getting ready for the next event. So drag our grow lights out onto the field at the northern end after the game, and they're still out there this morning. We'll remove those on Wednesday, ready for the Broncos Storm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So Suncorp Stadium is widely regarded as one of the best sporting grounds in Australia, if not the best. From your experiences, why do you think that is?
The atmosphere is pretty much unrivaled. I've worked at Marvel Stadium down in Melbourne, and I think in here, just with the stands being so steep, you're getting 52,000 people sort of on top of the surface, which does create that cauldron-like atmosphere, which is, I guess, what the stadium is known as well. And I think those, when you're getting a big crowd in here, like the Australia-France quarter-final we had in here the other week was absolutely unbelievable. The amount of noise that was coming out of the stadium was, I've never heard a roar like it when we scored that winning penalty, so that was pretty cool.
Very nice. So you mentioned Marvel Stadium there just before, and you were the grounds manager down there for quite a few years. Can you give the listeners a little bit of behind the scenes into what it's like to create a cricket pitch? Yeah,
so I actually didn't look after the cricket at Marvel. I certainly helped out, but it wasn't my role to roll out the actual wickets on for Marvel, so I can't really comment too much on that. But certainly have got wicket experience, and certainly at Marvel the difference is there. It's a drop-in wicket compared to most other traditional, like your club grounds or your park grounds, which are an in-situ type cricket pitch. So you're obviously dealing with moisture issues, trying to keep the surface as dry as possible. I guess having a roof helps in there, which was able to be used to our advantage. But the other side of the coin is too that you've got a roof. It does get 40 degrees in Melbourne quite regularly over summer, so getting that balance right and making sure the wicket's not drying out too much, particularly for the 2020s. That's always a challenge, trying to make sure you've got a good balance between bat and ball. But I guess T20s is obviously slanted towards flat tracks for the batters to whack the ball all over the park.
Yeah. You did also, I did see you did some work in Papua New Guinea on in a stadium up there. And then you've also been in Queensland and in Victoria. Are there some major differences that you've seen from your time in between looking after the turf in these different conditions?
Yeah, certainly major differences is your temperature, your humidity, your rainfall. So certainly the further north you go, that certainly changes a fair bit. So Papua New Guinea, very, very challenging climate with very, very windy city, Port Moresby, but very dry as well during the dry season. For 9 months of the year, it's very dry. In 3 months of the year, it's very, very wet. So, certainly over those hot summer months, it can be very oppressive. So you've obviously got to be looking out for turf grass diseases. So you're putting out fungicides left, right and centre pretty much to try and make sure the playing surface is at its best. And I guess that's probably the main difference between being down in Melbourne being a cooler climate, with generally a ryegrass playing surface, and then going further north, like up here, we're a couch grass playing surface, which is oversown with ryegrass during the winter months, and then PNG up there, it's always a warm season grass, no ryegrass, and that'd be absolutely impossible to grow the same grass in PNG that it would be in Melbourne. Yeah.
So just before we wrap up, do you have any tips for the everyday Joe who wants to just up their turf game at home?
I guess frequent mowing's the one. Watering, absolutely. Particularly at the moment, Brisbane's very, very dry. So it's been a very, very dry few months. So, watering overnight or watering after you've had dinner. Go and stand out there with a hose and a beer in your hand.
Bit of thatching as well.
Yeah, that's it. Give it a good water, and then certainly once you get to this time of year, like probably from September onwards, is when you probably want to start looking to do some dethatching or aeration of your lawn, top dressing, that sort of stuff. That's certainly what we look to do in here whenever possible, and whenever we get a window is probably the key one really. So top dressing, and then a good amount of fertiliser over the spring, summer, and autumn, and then you can kind of trail off over winter and sort of let it do its thing.
How good. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Matthew, and all the best with looking after the turf at Suncorp Stadium. We look forward to the Broncos v the Storm and looking at the immaculate pitch. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Matthew.
Cheers, guys. Thanks very much.